A few weeks ago, Sony reached out and offered an invite to their camera camp, which of course I accepted. And I'm not going to act like I didn't have anything to do with any of this stuff, so that's why I'm wearing the hat today. But at camera camp, they announced the ZV-E1, which is an amazing camera, but one that I feel like all of YouTube and the internet has mostly misunderstood. So from someone that is both newer to Sony, newer to video, but also has used all of the competing cameras in Sony's lineup, I want to give you all an overview of who I think each of these cameras are for, so that you're not just wasting your money running around and buying one of the cameras you don't necessarily need. So this video isn't sponsored, but if you want to support the channel, you can check out my presets and LUTs or join my Patreon in the description down below. Now, Sony did invite me to their camera camp and allowed me to use the ZV-E1 for the few days that I was down there. And while I don't have to make a video,
that's a bummer.
I think that having early access to this kind of stuff is probably part of the reason I was invited, but also one of the reasons I want to make a video like this so that I can give some of my insight and experience using all these different cameras to those of you at home who may be trying to decide between all these different models. So most of you are probably sort of familiar, at least, with the Sony FX3, which I'm filming into right here, as well as the Sony A7SIII, which is pretty much the same camera, just in a different body. I also use the Sony A7IV for mostly photo work, but a little bit of video work here and there. And then the Sony FX30, which is the kind of APS-C version of the Sony FX3. Up until the release of the ZV-E1, those are mainly the cameras that a lot of kind of the creator mode of people were using. All of them produce amazing images at 10-bit 422. They also give you every range of profile and things like S-Cinetone. And one of the things I did really love about the Sony ecosystem, and one of the reasons I jumped over here, is because you can take any of those cameras once you kind of hit a certain point and match them very, very easily, because they all get that same S-Log3 profile as long as that camera is 10-bit 422, meaning that all of those are going to have a wide color space and allow you to just make a really, really great image. Now, the Sony ZV-E1 that they announced is in their ZV line of cameras, but it is well more than twice as much as any other camera in that lineup. And rightfully so, because it has the same processor and sensor as the Sony FX6, the Sony FX3, the Sony A7S III. But you're taking all of that crazy power and tossing it into a tiny body. And if you were looking at those other cameras, putting it at a price point that is far below that, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of confusion, because kind of like a creator camera for like a Gen Z market being $2,200 at a starting point is kind of a weird spot. Now, one of the things that it did get over all of the other cameras that I've mentioned so far is it gets that AI processing chip that we first saw on the A7R5. And in my testing between the A7R5 and the A7IV here, it's not that the autofocus is faster with that, it's just that it's smarter. It's adding another processor and another brain in there basically to make better decisions essentially for all that kind of stuff. But because it has that AI processor in there, it was able to do some sneaky kind of interesting things that the other cameras that I have aren't able to do. So this is the Sony ZV-E1 with that tiny little 24mm f2.8G lens. Now, it's a little bit tighter because I'm using the active stabilization, so it's not as bumpy. But honestly, for a vlog thing, this doesn't feel that bad. But for someone like myself, I actually could probably get away with this. Now, the dynamic active mode is way too much. The shot is probably really, really stable, which is amazing. But it's obviously way too close to my face. This is me putting it as far back as I can. And now this is with the standard stabilization, so no cropping at all. So you can obviously see it's quite a bit more bumpy, but you know, see way more of the frame. I think for this camera, if they made like an 18mm, it'd probably be hitting the sweet spot. It does have a dynamic stabilization mode in there, which really allows you to I mean, you have to crop in quite a bit into the image, but for like things like product photos or just trying to get like good kind of like vlog worthy, but like cinematic kind of vlog stuff, like stuff that's better than a typical vlogger is going to get, but not like a production level kind of thing, if that makes sense. All of that kind of stuff on the ZV-E1 works fantastic.
Here's no stabilization with the 35 1.4. Here is the standard IBIS on the 35 1.4. Here is the active stabilization on the 35 1.4. And there is the dynamic active stabilization, which is obviously a pretty huge crop. But it's wild how stable this is.
As someone who does this whole YouTube thing, like, I guess sort of like as a part-time job now, but it's definitely not the majority of my income by far. I don't really have the budget to hire someone to come out and film some stuff of me, but with the AI reframing that the ZV-E1 does, it can zoom in, and especially for YouTube videos and things like that, and especially for social media stuff, where you want a little bit of that movement and the dynamics make all of that kind of stuff a lot more interesting. While it's not perfect, it's very interesting to me and was something that I was really impressed by, and something, frankly, that I do wish that I had on my cameras, although I obviously know that that's not possible because they don't have that processor. Now, as Sony's basically just taking the guts of the FX3 and the A7S III and shoving it into one of those plasticky kind of ZV style bodies, it does a lot of really great things, but obviously there's going to be some more limitations there versus like a cinema, whatever you want to call that type of body like the FX3, which I could shoot that thing all day at 4K 120 and just roll until the battery dies because it has an internal fan. And the Sony A7S III has heat dissipation and ways to get around that. Now, while we were in San Diego, it was raining, and it's not like it was easy to get the camera to overheat. A few people did, and I heard stories about people having their camera overheat, but a lot of it was they didn't have the higher thing turned on. I know my friend Chris Brockhurst is doing some tests as we speak, and a few other people on YouTube have done a lot of tests. But I think that the people that are wanting to buy this camera and shoot extended clips of 4K 60, that's where we're just kind of missing the point of this camera. So for something like the FX3, the FX30, even the A7S III, all those cameras are like more production cameras to me. They are made so that you can be a solo operator, you can go around, you can film other things. If I was going to do some sort of like talking head thing in the field, in a desert or something, I'd feel totally fine with using the FX3 here. And generally, it does a great job. I love the autofocus. I love everything about this camera. And it does, again, a great job of filming me, which is the primary thing that I'm using this for, filming me and other things. But I would say that if I had to put a designation on a camera like the FX3, it is for filming other things. It's not necessarily made for filming someone like myself, although, again, it clearly does a good job of that, but it can work in a higher production level as a B or a C cam. And where the ZV cameras are kind of set at is, again, they're set for vlogging, they're set for content creation, they're set for other things that just isn't necessarily that. I think for what that ZV-E1 camera is, it's fantastic. If you want to walk around and do a vlog at 4K 24, 4K 30, I don't see that being an issue. And if you're going out and vlogging, you know, those clips of 4K 60 or something aren't going to be just like big extended things that you're just doing for half an hour to an hour at a time. And I think for someone that wants to make YouTube videos, wants to put out stuff on social media, all that kind of stuff, that camera will absolutely crush it at that particular thing. And while I'm sure you can use it in a production standpoint if you really wanted to kind of push the limits, I don't think that's what it's for. But to be fair, once this camera gets the 4K 120 upgrade for some of the slow motion stuff, I'm sure it actually would fit all of the things I need for this YouTube channel. But I'm not someone that's going out and doing production work with my FX3 at this point, at least. So that's why something like the ZV-E1 for my YouTube channel, because that's essentially what all of this stuff is. It's all for social media. That camera will work really, really well for me. and the fact that the FX3 comes in at $3,900 and the ZV-E1 comes in at $2,200, it does make a lot of sense in that way. Is it going to replace an FX3? Not for most people. But can it do the same job as my FX3 is doing right now for someone like myself that's doing a lot of social media stuff? Yeah, that's what it's there for. So anyway, I hope that helped. The ZV-E1 is a fantastic camera. It's not like mind-blowing or game-changing or anything like that. But if you are someone like myself that is doing a lot of this stuff for social media, you are doing quick clips of higher frame rates, and you're doing a lot of talking head stuff, reels, YouTube videos, all that kind of stuff, that camera is going to be absolutely fantastic for you, and you're going to save a ton of money over something like the FX3. Am I going to sell my FX3 to get a ZV-E1? No, I do love that camera, and it does, again, everything else that the other one does outside of the AI stuff. And if I do want to do any more video projects outside of that, the FX3 is just never going to fail me, and I love everything about it, and it's honestly the camera that got me into this whole system. So thanks again, subscribe if you haven't already, and if you're interested in my A7IV video, you can check it there, or you can check out my video comparing the A7IV to the A7R5 up here, and I will see you in one of those videos.